welcome to the 100-Year Podcast. I'm your co-host, Gino Barbaro, and this is the show that's dedicated to personal financial engineering. Today, I have a special guest with us on the show. His name is Harry Barth. He's the founder and senior managing partner for Barth Calderon LLP and is the co-author of the book, Planning Today for All Your Tomorrows. I guess the only other thing I can say about Harry, he's been doing it for 50 years. So I think he's got a little bit of experience. So Harry, without further ado, welcome to the show, my friend.
Gino, thank you. It's great to be here this morning. For you this afternoon.
We dove with your story for 2 minutes before we got on the podcast. Can you just share, everyone, you're from New York, Florida, California, bouncing around, been doing it for 50 years. Just share your story.
Yeah, licensed lawyer in New York, licensed lawyer in California, licensed lawyer in Washington, licensed lawyer in D.C. And, it's just an interesting story. I look at the country as a whole and not as geographically. And for many, many, many years ago, one of the better places to build a professional practice was California and not South Florida. That has all changed quite dynamically, as you know, over the years, but it is what it is. And so that's where we built a practice, but we have a national footprint, not just local.
And Harry, please share with everybody, why are you still doing it after 50 years?
Well, it's been a passion of mine. I always said that if I ever had the opportunity to be in a position to help people the way in which we do, I'm just going to continue to do it as long as we're able to do so. And it changes. It's an evolving, I love doing what I'm doing as long as I'm capable of doing what I'm doing. Our firm will hopefully continue on and provide the services that I think are absolutely critical for your demographic. As we talked about a little earlier, lack of proper professional estate planning, the lack of proper professional asset protection. In most cases, when people call lawyers, they got a problem. Better call the lawyer. The hair is on fire. That's actually the wrong time to be calling a lawyer. That's when, it's necessitated. But when we have preemptive planning that's done in advance, as you like to think about it, long-term thinking about the potential problems that we face as a result of building our net worth. And, to me, it's kind of crazy. You spend time, effort, money building your net worth. You work so hard. You got to put some walls around it. You got to make sure it can move from generation to generation or it can be destroyed. And that, it was funny. I had an intern who's now my wingman with me for the last 8 years who interned with us for summer. He's a young kid. And he said, all these people, they're so wealthy. He said, why would they need all the things that we do? Don't they have it already? And what we find out is that actually, no, they don't. And why don't they? Because basically it's ignorance. They don't know what they don't know. And that's why you and I are doing what we're doing today, to see if we can make it a little bit better.
I agree. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance. That's Absolutely. The reality. And would you mind if I shared a quick story with you of why I'm so passionate about estate planning?
Absolutely, please.
So for me, it was 2007. I've only shared this a couple times, usually in closed events, but it's important because I want people to understand how truly important it is to plan for your estate and to plan for the next generation. It was in August, end of July, and my father was getting ready to pass away. And I remember being at the house, and I remember my accountant was there. I'm like, what the hell is my accountant doing here? Well, he's setting up the freaking credit shelter trusts and all this BS and getting the step up in basis. And at the same time, my priest is there delivering the anointing to the sick at the same time. So I'm saying this does not make sense. Why do you have to wait when you're emotional, probably make the wrong decisions? And my father passed away. My mom is still alive 15 years later. She sold the business that the trusts were created in. And every time she looked at those trusts, it must have brought back the pain and the anger and the sadness of my father passing away. If she had set that up prior and not had any emotions and been able to prepare for it, because you never know what happens. You may be a healthy 42-year-old, you walk across the street, you get hit by a car, that may happen to you. Hopefully you live to be 80 years old and you don't have to worry about it. But as you get older, you lose control of that. You lose control of your faculties. You have families starting to fight. Start doing it sooner so you don't have to wait for somebody to be on their deathbed and then start scrambling. You may make the wrong decision. You may have to overpay. You may forget about stuff. Don't get stuck in that. And I'll never forget it. My mom just ended up closing up those accounts a month ago when she should have closed them over 2 years ago. But I guess that was just her saying goodbye to my dad. And that was the last piece that she had of him. And 15 years later, it should have been like that. She should have prepared for that before that happened. But the old schoolers and a lot of people on here, 67% of you listening to this call right now do not have an estate plan. That's the fact. I know a lot more of you have it on this call because the type of people that listen to Jake and Gino and the 100-year understand, but there's still a lot of you out there that don't have a plan set up and don't have an estate set up. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let it fall to your kids to fight over the money. You're the director. You have the long-term mindset. You're the one who's responsible out there. Set it up for yourself and make sure you don't have that. You're always going to have infighting, but you don't have that infighting with your family. And I think that's the reason why we're doing this. We're trying to sell life insurance to help with the estate. We're trying to help people create the estate. Harry, from that, who needs estate planning out there?
Well, pretty much universally, everybody. And the degree of the estate planning is dependent upon family circumstances, net worth, liquidity, functionality or dysfunctionality in a family, whether or not a spouse is a U.S. citizen or a non-U.S. citizen, whether we have children, younger or older, who have special needs, if we have a child that has a drug, alcohol, or addiction problem. All of these factors factor into a plan. And the way I like to describe an estate plan, and we'll get into the weeds to some degree during our conversation, but as a general overall concept, legal documents could be pretty clinical. And dealing with your own mortality or your own morbidity is sometimes very, very difficult, and people avoid doing that. It's uncomfortable. But I like to change things a little bit. And when I talk about, the prototypical living trust, a good way to describe it is pretend, Gino, you and I are sitting in a theater, and it's you and I. And on the stage in that theater, it's your spouse, your children, your brothers, your sisters, people that work with you, business partners, are all on that stage. And we are going to write the script of what that stage is going to look like in the event that you're no longer here. We're going to write a play. We're not going to build a trust. We're going to write a play. And how the characters and the actors act and interact, we can make them fight if we want to make them fight. We can make it easy. We can protect them. We can do things fairly. We can do things unfairly. We can set the stage. And, and the power to do that is absolutely amazing. And when you start to focus on the fact that what an estate plan really is a script for the family in the event of incapacity, death, and really important, privacy. All right. We've all lost so much privacy in the world today. We can actually build it back in through estate plans. And the other thing, too, we talk about estate plans is people always say, well, I'd like to take the law into my own hands. Well, that's your opportunity to do so, because there is an estate plan. You live in Florida. If you don't have an estate plan, we live in California. You don't have an estate plan. You do. It's just written by the state for you. And it may not necessarily be, and the procedure that it's used. So, for example, if someone doesn't have an estate, they do. Everybody has one. It's either written for them by the state or one that they've done for their family, recognizing their specific family issues. I don't think I'd want the state to write my estate plan. The other thing, too, is that when the state is writing the estate plan, they have procedures. Some places they're known as probate proceedings. Some places they're known as surrogacy proceedings. But basically what it is a court proceeding on how we move assets from one generation to the next. Now, in California, for example, which has one of the worst probate processes in America, Florida, not much better as far as the probate proceedings are concerned, because of the higher level of older adults in Florida. The proceedings are a little bit more involved than other states. But, think about it. If we don't have proper estate planning, three things occur. One, time. How long does it take to get assets from generation 1 to generation 2 in the absence of proper planning? Well, it could take anywhere from 2 to 4 years. 2 to 4 years. I mean, it rolls off my tongue. It's a long time. I just closed out a trust administration literally this morning for 4 beneficiaries, and they were barking because it took about 6 months. All right. In the absence of a estate plan, would have taken, in this particular case, about 2.5 years. That's an awful long time. and the expense. So you have time and the expense. The expense could run 5% of the gross probate estate. So if you got a probate estate of $2 million, could be $100,000 of executors' fees, appraisal fees, lawyers' fees, an awful lot. So even if you're willing to deal with lawyers for 2 to 3 years, you're willing to pay hundreds of thousands that you would not have had to pay with a proper estate plan. There's the third component. And the third component is by far the worst. You would think the time and the money is the worst. It's really not. Everything that happens via the state process is a public process. Come to Gino's probate. Learn about his relationship with his family, with his children. Learn about all the things that went right and went wrong. Learn about all the assets. You wonder how all these predators learn about people who are in highly vulnerable positions. 25 cents and a stop at the courthouse and you can get everything. On the other hand, when things are done properly with proper and appropriate estate planning, that's not the case. It's all private and well done. So the other thing you mentioned that I'd like to step back a little bit on is that it's when one uses a trust. And the funny part is when I speak with people all day, they say, oh, I have a trust, I have a trust, I have a trust. As you talked earlier, there are spousal lifetime access trusts, there are irrevocable life insurance trusts, there are asset protection trusts, there are basic living revocable trusts, there are grant retained annuity trusts, and the list goes on and on and on. A trust is like saying I have a car. What model, what year, what type, what do you want to accomplish with it? So people need to learn these are just tools, all right? And how the tools are used in the hands of a competent, experienced professional is you take the tools that are appropriate to cover the goals that the family has. And of course, if we don't have goals, which you're really not going to have on a deathbed, all right? You don't have that thinking, you're not going to be able to have those goals and make them and discern them and craft the right trust in the right way to accomplish the goals and the objectives. So that's very, very important to understand. But besides a trust, there's other things we talked about, and that's incapacity. You may not necessarily get hit by a bus. You may get hit by the bus, but you didn't die. But you're incapacitated for a year and a half or two. But guess what? If you don't have appropriate and proper powers of attorneys or your assets are not appropriately, designated within the trust, and we'll talk about that in a moment, we're back to the state again, who has a conservatorship all ready to go, take $25,000, $30,000 worth of legal fees at court-supervised provision, and all public yet again. So we want to make sure, Gino, that in the event of an incapacity, that we have privacy, that everything's handled privately by proper people that we've picked for ourselves. This is all critically important. And last, before I'll take your next question, is that a lot of people do some basic estate planning. And, we'll call it the 35% to 40% that do. And when I look at them, I will see an out-of-state healthcare out-of-date healthcare directive. I will see that they built a trust. And then they spent a lot of time thinking about it. It wasn't the stage like you and I talked about. And they will have, a will, perhaps if they have minor children, naming some guardianships and an appropriate power of attorney, which, by the way, in your state and in almost every other state, a proper power of attorney is probably one of the most important documents that anyone can have. Mm. But here's what we also see. We see that we build a trust and say, oh, I have a trust. But they don't take and put all their assets legally titled into the trust. So they'll have their house inside the trust. Their bank accounts are not in there. Literally, their businesses aren't in there. Their real estate might be held in an LLC, maybe not held in an LLC or a limited partnership. And then those LLCs, limited partnerships, or the real estate on the deed, it'll say Gino and his spouse, tenants in common. It's not in a trust. So that means we have a trust, but everything is still going to probate. We didn't avoid the probate process. And people say, well, I have a trust. How come there's probate? Because we hear that from the children all the time. You made a trust for mom and dad, but we're still going to probate. How come? You got to put the passengers on the train. We could build the train. You got to put the passengers on the train in order for it to work. So it's actually kind of a fun process, believe it or not. And when well done, really, really rewarding. Let me just stop 1 second back a little bit about power of attorney. Dealing with a real estate transaction, dealing with an insurance, dealing with all the things that you guys deal with all the time. It all works as long as you have capacity. And We don't have capacity. Hey, I'm about to sell I had this lot. I had it in Florida. I was about to sell it. And then I got hit by the bus, and it required husband and wife's signature, and husband couldn't sign. He got hit by the bus. He's not dead. He'll be fine. But right now he doesn't have capacity. That sale stops. It's done. We don't have the legal ability. Someone has to have that power. It'll take us 6 months to get a conservatorship. That sale is dead. That opportunity is lost, and God knows what liquidated damages could have come along with that. With appropriate and proper powers of attorney, that sale would have happened. And it's very important to understand, too, one says, hey, Gino, upon your incapacity, Harry will take care of all your stuff for you. And of course, it begs the question, what's incapacity and how do we determine it? There are easy ways and hard ways. If I have to take you to 2 independent physicians to get you certified for not having capacity, might not work so easily. Maybe you said, I trusted Harry. Harry will just take care of it for me and get it done. You don't trust Harry? Revoke the power. So estate planning is really, really important. Let me hit one more thing for you. So we're talking about very, very rudimentary basic estate planning. But very, very rudimentary and basic estate planning has a magnanimous impact on a family. Writing that family script, staying out of probate and the rest. But we do have, as you know, and you mentioned it earlier in opening statement, we have another little friend that's called estate taxes. A lot of people don't even understand what that is. It's a tax on transfer at death. Under current law, there's no tax between spouses, husband, wife, husband, wife. There's no tax. But there is a tax between ourselves and anybody else, to your children, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, whatever it may be. And the tax rate as it stands today, which is constantly under attack, is 40% of everything over today, $12 million. It's $11,500,000. Let's call it $12 million, $24 million, husband and wife. Now, a lot of people don't have assets that are greater than $24 million, so it's not really applicable for them. But, life insurance counts. So we got $10 million term policy. That's $10 million. That's in the estate, unless we put it in an appropriate life insurance trust. And the other thing that's very important to understand is that this is political volleyball. So it's a couple of years ago now, after Joe Biden was elected president, and we had a Democratic House and Democratic Senate, there was an attempt to change the estate planning dynamic quite significantly. And in that dynamic, just so you should know, they wanted to move the estate tax exemption from 24 million down to 7 million. And they want 3.5 million husband, 3.5 million spouse, and a 50 to 55% rate for everything above that. Because they felt politically that wealth concentrating in the hands of a small number of families was not good for the United States of America. They truly believed that. Well, it didn't pass, thanks to Joel Manchin and Kristen Sinema. But it's always under attack. But what we do need to understand, is that on December 31st, 2025, by autopilot, that estate tax is moving from 25 million down to 12 million bucks. Yep. And it's 40% of everything above that. But you got to figure out, if someone has a large pile of real estate or a business, there's no liquidity. Hence, what do they need? Better buy some life insurance or find some other methodology. Government doesn't take property. Government doesn't take credit cards. Government takes cash 9 months from the date of the second death. And people say, I don't like life insurance. Well, that's okay. Just tell me where we're going to get the money at that particular time. And can you think of a better way to do it than that? But make sure that when we're in that territory, that life insurance is acquired properly, so the life insurance itself is not on the estate and subject to estate taxes. So there are lots of things. And that's when we talk about all the various other trusts and tools and techniques that we can utilize to help with that estate planning. And there are ways that we have today. You mentioned them earlier, non-reciprocal spousal lifetime access trust that allow us to potentially lock in that $24 million today before it turns to $12 million. Something that people should really consider in the hands of, an appropriate, well-experienced professional.
Great. Now, a couple comments. First thing, you make the government sound like the mafia. They don't take credit cards. They only want cash. Great.
It's true though.
Knew a lot of those guys, and I guess the government and the mafia, they sort of seem very similar, and they want their money. They're not going to wait for their money. And talk about usury. They really get you on the usury rates. I mean, you don't want to pay those interest rates to the government, and they don't stop, man. They just keep on ticking. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I really hope as you're listening to the show, I hope that you're a little afraid, that you're a little scared, because fear promotes us and prompts us to take action. You could be sitting back and saying, this is not going to happen to me. But guess what? Do you want the state to be your partner? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Do you want that family infighting? If you said, no, I don't want it, and no, I don't want the state, well, then the next action is to start looking up what whole life can do for you, number one, and what an estate attorney can do for you. Start the plan. I have just a couple more questions because I know we're going to dive into them real deep the second one. But the first one, for anyone listening on here, what are some of the objections you hear from people not wanting to start an estate plan, or it's not for them? So if maybe the listener hears that and goes, oh, I was using that. What a stupid reason for not doing it.
Well, I think in some cases, cost. Set aside, estate plan, average estate plan today, wills, trust, powers of attorney, costs between $2,000 to $2,500. Some are a little less expensive, some are a little bit more. Not all that expensive to do it. So I think that it's cost. Some people literally would rather spend $2,000 and buy bottles of wine rather than worry about their estate plan, because for them, they're thinking terms in death many, many years off, not in terms of incapacity, privacy, being able to sleep better at night. So cost is one. The next one is the difficulty of confronting some of the issues which will inevitably come up. So, and that is a challenge. So sometimes the best way, if husband and wife, for example, have minor children, and they always talk a little bit about who they would name the guardian. He says, well, it should be my brother. And she says it should be my sister. And this is dealing with their children. And so it is an emotional issue. And every time they talk about it, it ruins their weekend, it ruins their day. And people, or they have a child that has special needs, psychologically, they don't want to confront those issues. Now, all they've done is left it to the state. All right. And those issues will be dealt with. The fact that you didn't name guardians, the state will name guardians, and it may not necessarily be your choice. People don't think in that direction, but sometimes it's painful to deal with those things. The other thing, too, is a lot of people don't believe. They have a sense that their estate or the value of their assets is not big enough to deal with a lawyer and an estate plan. In other words, hey, we got a house, we got, $300,000, $400,000 of equity in the house. I got a 401k plan going by beneficiary. I got a life insurance policy going by beneficiary. I signed a form, for health care. I got a couple of bucks in the bank in a timeshare. And so as far as they're concerned, there's not enough to be involved in an estate plan. But the error, Gino, is that they may not necessarily need a complicated trust. But what they do still need is healthcare powers. There's no money involved with making healthcare decisions. They still may need who's going to make a decision in the event of incapacity, who could talk to Social Security, who could talk to the accountants, who could talk to the IRS, who could talk to the credit card companies. They won't speak to anybody unless they got power. And who's going to be a guardian for the children. As they may have very little assets, but they still have those issues. It's a much smaller level estate plan. It doesn't cost $2,500. Maybe it's $1,500. Not a lot of money to get it done, but they feel they don't have enough assets to warrant and justify it. But even in Florida, let's say they got $400,000 of equity in the home, which is a small amount of equity in the home, and you got husband and wife on title, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, and then they die or they get killed in a crash, whatever it may be, that house is going to probate. And it's going to be there for 2 years. Ugh. It's going to cost us, $25,000 of attorney's fees to get that house to the next generation. It would have been a lot easier. We made a simple trust through the house and it was done. It was there automatically. It's just, so I think those at that level, those are it's cost, it's dealing with it psychologically, sometimes very, very difficult, and not thinking that they have enough assets or issues to justify the time and the effort with a lawyer in getting that done, which also leads us to believe that the other issue that comes about, lawyer versus non-lawyer. We have LegalZoom and all of the others. And yes, they're less expensive, but what you don't get is you don't get a lawyer. And so what does that mean? You know, it's like going to the pharmacy and picking out your own pills, self-medicating. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it could be harmful. Sometimes it's not great. You're not paying the lawyers for the paper. LegalZoom can print paper all day long. What you're paying a lawyer for is the benefit of their experience to guide you as to the best choices to make for your family. It's not the paper. People say, it's just a document that comes out of the computer. Well, there may be 1,000 different articles that could go into a trust, but it's what combination of that, what 200 of that 1,000 is right for your family is the writing of the RX, the prescription. I don't care if LegalZoom fills it. It makes no difference. But when you get a lawyer, you have somebody there with experience and knowledge to help you know that, you have a special needs child. What are we going to do about that? My spouse is not in the United States. I mean, she's not a U.S. citizen, or he's not a U.S. citizen. Makes a difference. So I think that all of those things combined together lead people to sometimes not do an estate plan when they should. And then like the story that you said at the beginning of our call, and then at the last minute, like you said, the priest and the accountant show up. It's really odd, and it's not going to be the optimum result. Matter of fact, in many, many cases, a lot of the planning that's done is known as deathbed planning. When it comes to estate taxes, are disregarded by the government. It's not real planning. It's really interesting on that. So a classic example of that is, without digging too much into the weeds, is that, when you have the valuation, for estate tax purposes, there are discounts that are available, minority interest that are being transferred, or lack of managerial control. So there were cases where a family would show up, a mom or dad is on deathbed, even on life support. They would form a limited partnership or an LLC. And then using power of attorney, they would transfer the assets into that LLC and then pull the plug and then try to claim a discount because the assets were in an LLC. And of course, those were attacked as just not viable. And so a lot of the tools that we use have to be also used at the appropriate and proper time.
Let me go back and just really discuss or really diagnose what you just said for the listeners out there, because you're a lawyer, you're legal, you speak really eloquently. For me, it's price versus value. Are you cheap? Or, is it something costs you something versus the value? The value of spending $2,000 to be able to have peace of mind for the next 30 years. Skip the Starbucks, skip the wine for the next 2 months. Spend it on the estate planning, number one. The pain. I think for everyone out there who's a 100-year real estate investor and who's a long-term thinker, we all have to come up with pain and have those uncomfortable conversations. And those of us that can have those uncomfortable conversations usually get better at it. And we have to just sit down and say, this is what it's all about. I wish my dad had sat down with my mom years before and said, this is what we need to do. So I don't think he meant to put my mom in that situation. It just happened that way. So I'm just imploring all of you out there, if you're in that kind of situation, there's going to be pain, because I have 6 children. So for me, when I was going through it, who do I leave the guardianship to my 6 children for? Is it my brother? Is it my sister-in-law? Those are difficult conversations. Thankfully now, my daughter's 23. Gabriella, you're getting them all, baby. You're getting all 5. So they're all going to you. So I passed that one.
And you did that, and I bet you left a reasonable amount of life insurance to make sure that she had the economic wherewithal to take care of them. If you got the power, you need the money.
And I got them whole life policies too on all the kids. And I think the last one is for everybody out there. Don't think of yourself as, I am not Trump, or I am not Gino, or I am not Harry. I don't have enough assets. This has nothing to do. That's the poor person's mentality. It's not poor versus wealthy. If you have a wealthy mentality, the rich mentality thinks about planning, thinks about the future, thinks about leaving a legacy. I've even got a financial plan for my children of what I want them to accomplish, what videos I want to watch. This is part of why I'm doing these shows and creating this content and writing children's books, because part of my estate is, as I pass on to the next generation, I want to pass on legacy skills, not just money to continue to perpetuate that, but I want to be able to control that. So for those of you out there, don't think you don't have enough. Don't partner with the state. please don't do that. Create your own plan. Now, Harry, the next question, this may take us to the end of the show because this may be a little bit more involved. But if I'm out there, I'm a younger person, where do I start with estate planning? And if I'm somebody who's more accomplished, where do I start at that point if I had it?
Yeah, let's divide it into two parts. Okay, so everybody, we all learned a new word, including me. So the two parts is I want to spend a few moments with the audience talking about asset protection as well, which will take us to the end of the show. But where do we start? You start by simply, it's real simple. So for example, in our organization, our law firm, and we work nationwide, it starts with a simple complimentary consultation. You sit down with someone like myself, and we talk about it. We talk about these hard issues, talk about what assets we have, how they're held, the amount, net worth, family, things we want to accomplish. And then we can determine what, if anything, is needed and how much it costs to do it, how long the process takes to do it, what are the steps in the process, how much of your time is involved. To me, people spend